Hello to you. It's midday here in Moscow. My name's Colin Bray. You're watching RT International, where we've had breaking news in the past half an hour or so, confirming what was suspected yesterday with regards to Julian Assange's fate, in that a UN panel has found, a UN expert panel which has been looking into his case, has agreed with Julian Assange that he's been arbitrarily detained by Sweden and the United Kingdom since his arrest in London on the 7th of December 2010. What's more, it also says that they expect Assange to be compensated for that time that he's been spent holed up at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, which is where we go now, because RT's Laura Smith is there outside waiting to talk to us. Laura, just bring us up to date, if you will, on what's happening where you are.
So we've had this decision by the UN working group on arbitrary detention. Still no movement from inside the embassy, which is a bit disappointing for all of us. But the decision that the UN working group released is unequivocal. I'll just read you a couple of bits of it to show you how unequivocal it was. It said that the working group recognised that Julian Assange was entitled to freedom of movement and to compensation. They considered that the various forms of deprivation of liberty to which Julian Assange has been subjected constitute a form of arbitrary detention. They said it should be brought to an end, that his physical integrity and freedom of movement should be respected, and that he should be entitled to an enforceable right of compensation. They also said in their statement, which is contrary to what the UK government's saying at the moment, that their opinions are legally binding to the extent that they are based on binding international human rights law. So unequivocal, as I say, and a moment of sweet victory for Julian Assange, and particularly his legal team, who must have worked tirelessly to bring this about.
Yeah, to be a fly on the wall inside that building right now to see what kind of conversations are taking place. What other kind of reaction has there been, either from the police or the government?
Well, the government haven't come out and said anything this morning since the decision has been released, as far as I'm aware. But on Thursday, they were already anticipating this because, of course, they've known the results of this for a few days now. They've had a few days to think about what they're going to do. And what the authorities said was that if he did step outside the embassy, then they would still arrest him. They said that there's still an allegation of rape outstanding and that there is still a European arrest warrant in his name, so they are obliged, the UK authorities, to extradite him to Sweden if they get a chance. So they say that it's not legally binding. The Swedish authorities also said that it hasn't made any difference, but we do understand that the Swedish prosecutor is now seriously considering whether to come to the UK and interview Julian Assange here, which is something that both parties, as far as we understand, have tried to make happen before. But now, of course, there's a moral obligation, thanks to this UN ruling, that they will presumably try to do that a little bit harder.
OK, for now, Laura, outside the Ecuadorian embassy in central London. Thanks for that. We'll keep coming back to you during the course of the coming hours, up to and including when we hear from Julian Assange himself in 3 hours or so from now. Laura, for now, thank you for that. Let me just give you a quote from what the panel has published today. The working group maintains that the arbitrary detention of Mr. Assange should be brought to an end, that his physical integrity and freedom of movement be respected, and that he should be entitled to an enforceable right to compensation. Right, let's go live now to Julian Assange's father, John Shipton, who joins us live from Melbourne. Mr. Shipton, thanks for giving us your time on RT International. Have you spoken to Julian today?
Not today, no, not today.
You haven't? When was the last time you got to talk to him? And did you know that this was going to happen?
We were together at Christmas and New Year, and this matter did arrive, and we were hopeful that the decision that has been made would be made.
What do you think he's thinking at the moment, now that the UN has gone his way? He said it was his last course of appeal, having exhausted all other avenues. What do you think he's feeling right now?
A joyful anticipation of being able to walk down the road and have a cup of coffee, I imagine. That's what I would feel like.
Yeah, because of course it wasn't just this near 4 years at the Ecuadorian embassy. He was under house arrest for how many months in Norfolk before all that? He's been inside a building?
Total of about 5.5 years now. And the treatment is of Julian is cruel and sadistic. The Swedish prosecutor simply ignores every appeal to reason and law.
Yeah, and why haven't they, in the Swedish prosecutors, if we're just focusing on the complaints made against him by the sexual assault complaints, why hasn't Sweden just gone and sent investigators to go and question Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy? What's stopping them? They've done it before in other cases, haven't they?
Well, it's curious because the prosecutor has brought diminished the stature of Swedish law administration, and also pointed out that there are flaws in the legal system, in as much as that the prosecutor can throw you into a dungeon without appeal and without contact.
Britain's... sorry, go on.
Further to that, the European arrest warrant under which Julian was arrested has been changed upon Julian's case, where the prosecutor simply said that issued an arrest warrant, European-wide, and a red notice, that Julian was wanted for questioning, just questioning. We want to ask you some questions. Julian attended a session before leaving Sweden and gathered permission to leave Sweden from this very same prosecutor. I would also point out that the chief prosecutor of Stockholm, Eva Fine, found that there was no case to answer and that questioning was not necessary. This person has completely diminished Swedish law administration in the eyes of all of Europe.
When you said you saw Julian and spent Christmas together and said he was feeling hopeful, we've been showing a montage of images of Julian over the years in that time that he's been at the Ecuadorian embassy. When you saw him as a father, how did that make you feel?
Oh, well, it's quite wearing on him, being, without son and always under threat of the British police breaking, or the UK police breaking into the embassy and arresting him. It's very stressful and disturbing, particularly when the rest of the world knows that you're innocent of these allegations. And now, of course, in large courts, 3 of the allegations simply fell away over time.
And can I also just ask you, if Julian is arrested, if he leaves the embassy, either today or whenever, what's the next step?
Well, I'm not privy to that, but I can say that Australia in 1975 presented to the UN General Assembly all of the for the Assembly to bring into international law all of the outlines of asylum. So Australia was in the forefront of establishing international law and convention over asylum. That the UK government has seen fit to disavow or ignore conventions and international law is a scandal in itself, and the UK government and the Australian diplomatic service will have to adjust this so that Julian can go free, and so that the British government, the UK government, is no longer seen as failing to uphold international law and its obligations.
So if you could go face to face now with a representative from the British government, which has already said that they've made it quite clear they're going to ignore this ruling. It's not legally binding as far as they're concerned. If you were face to face with somebody who could make that decision, what would you say to them?
Oh, I'd firmly make the point that London is an international financial centre where many very important contracts are signed. And the proper and fair adjudication of those contracts keeps London in the forefront as a financial centre. it's becoming clear after the Owen inquiry, which was just issued its report a couple of weeks ago, as you remember, the Hutton inquiry and Lord Phillips's decision in Julian's case, that you can no longer expect fair treatment from British law if you sign contracts in London and in the UK. So this is a profound problem, an ongoing problem for a great financial centre, and London, which is also a diplomatic centre for the last 300 years. They need to attend to this immediately.
And can I just ask you, bearing in mind yesterday when we had that tweet from Julian, and maybe he already knew what the UN panel was going to say at that time, but it was clearly a statement of just how fed up he is at being holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy and not having his liberty after all that time, by saying, if it doesn't go my way, I'll just walk out and get arrested. That's it. All appeals are over. Now that that's not the case, what do you think Julian's going to do when he appears on that balcony in 3 hours? Do you expect him to leave the Ecuadorian embassy either in the coming hours, days or weeks? Or does a whole new process of appeals now start that he's got the shield of that UN ruling to hand?
Well, I imagine, I can't put words in his mouth, but I imagine if it were me, I'd insist that the conventions of asylum be obeyed. An international law asserted to grade and organise relationships between sovereign nations. This is important for all of us, and particularly Julian, that the conventions and international law covering asylum be obeyed. There are 10,000 people in Spain in 1939 in asylum in various missions. In Chile, after Pinochet's coup, there were many, many thousands of people in diplomatic missions in Santiago seeking protection from prosecution or persecution. And these laws are there to guide nations in their dealing with each other. They must be tended to.
Mr. Shipman, I really appreciate you spending your time to talk to us on this day. It's been really good to talk to you. Thanks very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
That was John Shipton, Julian Assange's father, talking to us on the line from Melbourne. Right, let's go live to central London again, the Ecuadorian embassy, where in just under 3 hours we're expecting Julian Assange to say what he's going to do next. Laura, what's on the cards?
Well, I'm just going to come back to that, if you don't mind, because I want to bring you bang up to speed. Just in the last few minutes, we've had a statement from the Foreign Office, which is answering the decision of the UN working group. And if you thought the working group's opinion was unequivocal, then you should hear the Foreign Office statement. It starts with the sentence, "This changes nothing." We completely reject any claim that Julian Assange is a victim of arbitrary detention. They say he's been voluntarily avoiding lawful arrest, and that they will essentially still try to arrest him if he does exit the embassy. So that narrows his options, at least for today. We know that he was going to come out of the embassy if the decision went against him. Now that it's gone for him, it still looks like the situation remains pretty much unchanged. He's in there in the building behind me, waiting for his passport to be returned. But meanwhile, the UK government is saying that effectively the UN decision means nothing. So as to what he will do later on, I mean, obviously we're having this media conference at midday just down the road in the Frontline Club. Assange, we understand, is going to come in there via video link. So we will hear what he's got to say about that. But certainly, as far as the opinion of the UK government goes, nothing has changed. And even if he does come out, there is a very real risk that he would be arrested. And then, of course, if the European arrest warrant was dropped, that would leave the way open for the US to apply for his extradition there. We know that there has been a secret grand jury investigation into his leaking of classified documents. So the US still desperately wants to get its hands on Julian Assange. Nothing has changed there as far as we understand. And that's the thing that he's always been afraid of. He's always been afraid that the US authorities would apply apply for his extradition. And there is a very real and publicised risk to him there, as evidenced by death threats that have been made by influential people in the media. Let's hear them.
Julian Assange is a cyber terrorist in wartime. He's guilty of sabotage, espionage, crimes against humanity. He should be killed.
The way to deal with, in the national security of the United States, the way to deal with this is pretty simple. We got special ops forces. I mean, the dead man can't leak stuff. This guy's a traitor, a treasonous, and he has broken every law of the United States. The guy ought to be, and I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, the only one to do it, illegally shoot the son of a
Just some of the furious words there from some of the people in the mainstream media over the past few years with regards to Julian Assange's fate. And we also were talking to Laura Smith, who's outside the Ecuadorian embassy in London. We'll come back to her in a few minutes' time, or indeed if anything does happen, if we see any movement at the balcony there. Let's